The emergency beacon had been transmitting for 6 hours before anyone thought to ask Emma-chan why she was smiling. 50 cadets of the Galactic Union Academy sat huddled inside the wreckage of the GSV Meridian, a training vessel that had been torn from its flight path by the gravitational claws of Varith 9, a Class 5 storm planet, officially designated uninhabitable, extreme threat, no salvage recommended in 17 different galactic languages. The hull groaned in rhythms that matched the outside wind. Lightning cracked across a sky the color of bruised iron. Rain didn't fall here. It attacked, moving sideways at speeds that could strip paint from hull plating. Cadet Commander John Vosek crouched over his datapad, face tight. "Beacon's working," he said, voice flat. "Rescue window is approximately 72 hours. Assuming the storm system doesn't worsen." "It will worsen," said the Valurian exchange cadet, Seth, whose membrane eyes were fully dilated in fear. "I have read the geological survey. Varith 9's storm cycle escalates over the first 4 planetary rotations before it plateaus. We arrived at hour 1 of a new cycle." Silence dropped over the group like a second hull. 72 hours. Escalating storms. 1 cracked water recycler. Half rations. And Emma-chan, sitting cross-legged on a cargo container with her boots off, studying the storm through the viewport like she was watching a nature documentary she rather enjoyed. "Chun." John walked over, keeping his voice low. "You want to tell me what's going on in your head?" Emma looked up. She had the kind of calm that wasn't performed, the kind that came from a nervous system that had simply been trained, since birth, to treat chaos as background noise. She was from Earth. Old Earth. Specifically, she was from the Canadian Rockies, where her grandmother had taught her to track predators by smell, and her father had made her swim rivers in snowmelt season because, he'd said, the cold is not your enemy, it's just weather. "I'm doing a site assessment," she said. "A site assessment?" She pointed at the viewport. "See that rock shelf, about 200 meters north-northeast? It's angled at roughly 40 degrees. The wind is hitting it and shearing upward, which means the ground directly behind it, maybe a 15-meter pocket, has dramatically reduced wind exposure." She tilted her head. "That's Camp Alpha." John stared at her. "You want to go outside?" "The water recycler is cracked, John. We have maybe 30 hours of drinking water at current consumption. There's precipitation out there moving at highway speeds, which means there is water out there." She hopped off the crate and pulled her boots back on. "I just need to build a collection system. The wind will kill you. The wind will try." She stood and stretched her back. "I grew up on a planet where the fauna actively hunts humans. A storm is just weather that doesn't have opinions about eating me. That's practically a vacation." She went out in a tethered suit. She came back 40 minutes later, soaked to the bone and grinning, with 3 meters of salvaged conduit tubing fashioned into a crude but functional wind catchment funnel. She'd hammered it into the rock shelf with tent stakes and angled it toward a natural depression in the stone she'd noticed from the viewport. "It'll collect about 12 liters an hour in these conditions," she announced to the stunned group, wringing out her braid. "More when the storm escalates." Seth blinked all 4 of his eyes. "You went into a Class 5 atmospheric event and came back with plumbing. I also found a thermal vent cluster about 40 meters from the shelf. Geothermal. Means we have a heat source that doesn't require fuel." She grabbed a ration pack and tore it open. "And the rock composition is silicite heavy, which means the lightning isn't going to ground anywhere near us. It's hitting the metallic plains about a kilometer east. We're basically in the quiet corner." John sat down slowly. "Emma, when did you figure all of this out?" "First 20 minutes after we crashed." She chewed. "I was waiting to see if anyone else would notice." "Why?" She shrugged. "I didn't want to make anyone feel bad." By hour 14, Emma had organized the cadets into functional teams. Not by rank, by skill set. The Valurians, whose biology allowed them to sense electromagnetic fluctuations, were on storm prediction duty, giving the group 30-minute advance warnings before intensity spikes. The Drothi twins, whose exoskeletal physiology made them effectively windproof, became the exterior crew. 2 Terran cadets from coastal fishing families turned out to share Emma's instinct for improvised engineering, and together they'd built a secondary shelter from hull panels and cargo webbing. John coordinated logistics, which was what he was good at. He watched Emma work and kept a running log in his head of everything she did that he hadn't thought to do. It was a long list. She'd started a fire, a controlled fire, inside a geothermal vent cavity, venting smoke out through a gap she'd identified in the rock ceiling. She'd mapped safe transit routes between the ship and the rock shelf using colored wire markers, each path tested for ground stability first. She'd organized the rations not by equal distribution but by caloric need per body mass, which meant the larger cadets stopped complaining about hunger and the smaller ones stopped being overfed. She'd even, on hour 20, found what she called interesting fauna. "Emma," John said carefully, when she came inside with something cupped in her hands. "Please tell me that's not alive." "It is alive." She set it on the cargo container. It was a creature about the size of a fist, built like an armored pill bug, with 6 stubby magnetic legs that let it cling to the rock walls even in wind that would have launched a human sideways. "I'm calling it a storm grip." "Look," she turned it over gently. "It secretes a substance on its feet that's basically natural adhesive. If I can harvest even a small amount, we can use it to seal the crack in the water recycler." Seth approached, reluctantly fascinated. "You picked up an unknown creature from a death planet." "I checked it first. No apparent defensive mechanisms, no venom sacs, docile response to contact." She scratched the thing behind what might have been its head. "It made a sound like a small motor." "It's fine. It likes me." "Of course it does," John said. Rescue came at hour 68, 4 hours ahead of schedule. The GSV Callaway broke through the cloud layer and descended toward the beacon, and the pilot, a veteran named Torres, came in expecting to find survivors in varying states of distress. Instead, she found 50 cadets in organized, functional condition. A secondary shelter, a water collection system, a fire. Someone had drawn a grid map of the immediate area on the ship's hull in weatherproof marker. There was a schedule pinned to the interior wall. Torres stood in the airlock and looked at Cadet Commander John Vasek. 68 hours on Verith, 9, she said. "What exactly happened here?" John glanced back at Emma, who was saying goodbye to the storm grip before releasing it back onto the rock wall. "We had a Deathworlder on the team," he said. Torres followed his gaze. "She from Earth?" "Rockies." The pilot nodded slowly, with the particular expression that crossed people's faces when they were simultaneously impressed and very slightly afraid. "Yeah," she said. "That'll do it." The official incident report, filed 3 weeks later, included a section that would become required reading at the Galactic Union Academy for the next 40 years. Observation. In a scenario rated beyond survivable parameters for most galactic species, Cadet E. Chun, Terran, Earth, Rocky Mountain region, treated environmental conditions as a logistics problem rather than an existential threat. This cognitive reframing, inherited from a species that evolved on a Class 4+ Deathworld and survived through adaptation rather than avoidance, produced outcomes that standard crisis protocols had not anticipated. Recommendation: cross-species survival curriculum to include Terran field methodology. Additionally, all future survival ratings for Verith 9 should note the following amendment. Class 5 Storm Planet. Uninhabitable. Extreme threat. No salvage recommended. Exception: Terrans from mountainous regions, who will likely find it a bit breezy.